incredible legislative champion. First and foremost, she learned the issue. As I mentioned, we worked with a lot of different patrons, but Delegate Price learned the issue inside and out. She met with us on a regular basis and helped strategize and really kind of keep us abreast of where things were working kind of behind the scenes. She mobilized her colleagues on the Democratic side. She did a lot of great behind-the-scenes work with Republicans. I think everybody knows that the Republicans right now control both chambers of the House and the Senate, and she did a lot of work to get those folks on board. And perhaps most importantly, she's an incredibly eloquent speaker and framed the issue really well. And it was because of those reasons and probably many more that I'm not listing that we were able to help contribute a little way for this bill to have success. So. Before we bring Delegate Price up here, I did want to bring up our Executive Director Kim Bobo and Board Member Reverend Anthony Flood.
I want to reiterate what Benjamin said. Again, we've had some champions on things and who sometimes could get up and you're not sure they really understand the bill. I wish that weren't the case, but you know I'm not making this up, right?
Continue.
Anyway, you were amazing. I mean, when I thought about it, I was like, you have purpose, you know what you want to do, you have persistence to keep working, and you have presence. And I have never seen the politics that I saw the day that it came up in committee. And you had, so she's up there talking about the bill, people are asking questions, legislators are scurrying around, they're saying to her, we're concerned about this in terms of the governor, but we really like you and we want to support this, and they're doing backroom conversations on the side. I've been in a lot of legislative hearings and I've never seen one quite like that. And I think honestly, I'm not sure every delegate could have made it through that craziness. And again, you had purpose and persistence and presence in that crazy situation, and that's why the bill got passed, was because of you and your persistence, presence and purpose. So with that we would like to give you an award. So if you'll come up, we'll formally get this and get a few pictures, and then we would like you to tell us a few words and whatever you can tell us about what was really going on. We'd love to hear that.
I am definitely honored to be here today, and I thank you all for your presence. I first want to give mention that First Church of Newport News Baptist was actually founded by my great-great-great-grandfather, and it was the first form of organized religion in the city of Newport News as it was formed at that time, before merging with Warwick County and all of that history. So my mom just saw that our family is on the bulletin board, so it's really special to be here today, and it's also special for you all to have taken some time to be here for this luncheon. And I want to thank the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, not only for celebrating today, but for believing in me enough to entrust me with a piece of their legislation from their legislative agenda. And we will definitely get to the story. But just to give you a little bit of picture of what else I was working on, I had bills for equity within access to health care, redistricting criteria, so that when the maps are drawn, minority votes and voices are protected and respected, especially in light of the Voting Rights Act being gutted to its core. We worked with the Department of Medical Assistance Services. We worked with mental health professionals, so we got a new category for qualified mental health professionals to be able to register and start off as a trainee and work their way up. as Kendall mentioned, we tried to get a bill that would mandate all of the state-level emergency preparedness information to go out. And that was based on real life. If you're familiar with Cottage Grove here in Newport News, it's an apartment complex that has a lot of our Latinx community members living there. And when we were knocking doors for another reason, they are in or very close to evacuation zone A, did not know a hurricane was coming, did not know that they were supposed to be packing up their things and leaving. And on the federal level, FEMA has to provide their information in different languages. And included in the bill, just so that we're sure that this wasn't just about not liking immigrants as to why the bill failed. It was also for people who speak American Sign Language, because they're hard of hearing, or people that have developmental issues that cannot communicate in the same ways, whose lives are just as worthy as those of us that speak English as our first language. So we will be bringing that bill back if I am so blessed to get back to the House of Delegates. We also had a bill that helps protect first responders, healthcare workers, and school employees if they are exposed to someone else's bodily fluids. And we worked with a very courageous young woman who had been the victim or survivor of a sexual assault, and how schools handle that for students and protecting the students. So we had a busy year, and it was then after we had put those in that I met with Benjamin and Kim, and we decided that it was right for us to move forward with this legislation, which was House Bill 2473. One of the most important parts of, I think, of our conversation, even before the events of February happened, that catapulted race to the forefront of our statewide conversation. So to be clear, they were ahead of the game. They had already put this bill in with me before that happened, because they've been consistently working on issues of inequities, but was to right the wrongs of the past so that we can set a pathway forward in the future. And so when the Virginia Minimum Wage Act was put forward in the 70s, for this language from the Jim Crow era to have been included, and even worse language in states like North Carolina that had exemptions based on race as well, and historical exclusions, these exemptions were not necessary. And that's the argument that we made. So fast forward to the day that we get there. So what happens when you tinker with a specific code or section of the code? There are ways for that legislation to then be utilized maybe later to make even bigger changes to that code. Well, this bill happened to be in the code that's right near the minimum wage and potentially increasing what we consider to be minimum wage. And so while some of us are very much on the side of increasing our minimum wage to an actual living wage, where people can have one job and still have an intact family, time to be with their family, and still be able to pay basic necessities, that was not the conversation we were trying to have with this legislation. But because it was so close to that, that is what Ms. Bobo was speaking to. So some of the members were like, we're fine with your bill, but we're not fine with what could happen. And so there was some negotiating that had to occur. And I want to publicly thank both my Democratic and Republican colleagues that saw fit that I am a woman of my word, and this was about this bill. And we were able to get that through. And then Senator Spruill had the Senate bill on the Senate side, so we had to do negotiating there as well for the Senate. Lots of moving parts, lots of energy, but it started the conversation because 80% of the people that we talked to about this within the legislature did not know the exemptions were there if they're not really familiar with that section of the code. So it was an awareness exercise in addition to actually getting the bill passed. So it was my absolute honor and pleasure to be a part of a team, a real team that got this done. And I know that this is just the first step. The organization itself and also the legislative partners, we are committed to continuing working on economic justice and issues of economic justice to include paid family medical leave, fair taxation, so that the bottom 50% is not paying a higher tax rate than the top 10%, and how we allocate funds in our budget. There is space for us to work on issues of equity. There are equal pay. Ban the box. How can people get jobs so that they can feed their families, have safety, security, all of the things that some of us really do take for granted that aren't as accessible to some of our other residents here in Virginia. Excuse me. And then, of course, something that the Interfaith Center knows very well because of their leadership in pressing for Medicaid expansion, but that's continuing to protect our access to healthcare. That is an economic issue as well as a human issue. So there is also the issues of intersectionality, how race and gender and economics play into all of these. And so we look forward to this being congratulations, but and also let's keep going, and how we're going to work together to keep going. And I just want to say a word of that with this being an election year. Voting is of utmost importance, and I think we were able to get Medicaid expansion and HB 2473 and things of that sort passed because of voters with like minds coming together and making our issues be known on election day. But I would argue that is just the beginning of the process. We then must make sure that our faith communities stay engaged in the process the entire way through. So if you have not been to Richmond to tell your legislator or me how you feel about certain issues, then let's see where we can engage even further and organize. Pastors and people of faith hold very powerful positions because people listen to what you have to say. And if we are teaching and educating and organizing, we will be able to do even more in the coming years to bring equitable access and justice to the Commonwealth. And I think that is where we can all agree work needs to be done. So I just want to thank you again so much for taking time out of your day to be here. I will be speaking a little bit more into some policy this evening if you have some time to join me again. I have my post-session forum this evening at 6 o'clock at the Holiday Inn in City Center. You might know it as the Old Omni, but just kind of delving a little bit more. But you will hear this story again because this bill was really important to get the ball moving to understand unfair policies are in our code right now. And we have to be committed to turning and flipping the tide to protect our workers, have fair wages, and make sure that those inequities are coming to an end. And so I appreciate the Interfaith Center for Public Policy, what you all are doing, and I look forward to working with you on the next issues. So thank you.